Good evening. Thank you for being here today. Christmas is considered the loudest and most joyful time of the year, but there are people for whom this holiday sounds very different. For them, it rings with deafening silence. This is a story about the first time, the first Christmas after the voice that filled the house with life fell silent, after we turned into a lonely I. Thomas was 72, and this was his first Christmas without Martha. They had lived together for 45 years. Martha wasn't just a wife. She was the glue that held their world together. She was the smell of pies, the sound of laughter, and the warmth in the bed. Now the house was perfectly tidy and terrifyingly empty. His children invited Thomas to stay with them in Chicago, but he refused. He said he wanted peace. In reality, he was simply afraid that his grief would be even more noticeable in a strange house. On the morning of December 24th, Thomas decided to skip Christmas. "I'll just go to bed early," he told his reflection in the mirror. "It's just a day, an ordinary Tuesday." The fridge was almost empty. Why cook if there is no one to eat? He sat in his armchair and opened a book, trying not to look at the empty chair by the window, Martha's favorite spot. But the silence pressed on his ears. It wasn't a peaceful silence, but a heavy, viscous emptiness. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the kitchen table. There, forgotten since last week, lay an old tin box of recipes. Martha called it her box of secrets. Thomas walked over to it. His hands were trembling. He opened the lid. It smelled of vanilla and old paper. On top lay a sheet covered in her flying, rounded handwriting. "Christmas rosemary stew." Thomas likes it thick. He read that sentence, and his breath caught. It felt as if she had touched his shoulder. "To hell with it," Thomas whispered. He grabbed his coat and went to the store. An hour later, the kitchen, which had been silent for 6 months, came alive. Thomas had never really cooked. That was Martha's domain. But today, he followed her instructions like holy scripture. "Chop the onions fine. Don't slack off, you old grump." He seemed to hear her voice as he cried over the cutting board. "Don't skimp on the butter. The diet starts in January," memory whispered as he heated the pan. The sizzling of oil, the chop of the knife, the smell of garlic and thyme. These sounds displaced the dead silence. Thomas was covered in flour. He dropped a towel. He burned his finger. But he was alive. He argued with her aloud. "I'm putting in enough pepper, Martha. Don't start." For the first time in months, he didn't feel lonely. She was here, in the aroma of rosemary, in the steam rising from the pot. In every movement he repeated after her. By evening, the stew was ready. The house filled with a thick, spicy scent, the scent of their 45 Christmases. Thomas set the table. He took out the fancy tablecloth, lit the candles, and placed 2 plates, not because he had gone mad, but because it felt right. He served himself some stew. Then he put a small portion on the plate opposite. He poured 2 glasses of wine. He sat down, looked at the empty chair. Strangely, the chair no longer seemed empty. It was filled with memory. It was filled with gratitude. "Merry Christmas, darling," Thomas said, raising his glass. His voice trembled but didn't break. It turned out a bit salty, but you would have said it was zesty. He ate in silence, but it was a different silence. Warm, cozy. He felt peace. He realized that grief is not the absence of love. Grief is love with nowhere to go. And today, he gave it a direction. He poured that love into a dinner cooked in her honor. As the clock struck midnight, the phone rang. It was his daughter. "Dad, how are you? We're worried." "I'm fine, sweetie," Thomas replied. And he wasn't lying. I just had dinner with Mum. A pause hung on the line, full of alarm. I made her stew, he explained gently. And you know, I think I learned not to dry out the meat. He hung up and walked to the window. It was snowing outside. Thomas knew that tomorrow he would be sad again. The pain of loss doesn't disappear in one evening. But now he knew the recipe. Literally and figuratively. As long as we remember their habits, as long as we cook their food, as long as we speak to them in the silence, they do not leave. Thomas left Martha's plate on the table until morning, and he went to sleep, feeling warmth in his feet for the first time in a long while. The recipe box remained on the counter. There were still many notes inside. Enough for many evenings. If there is an empty chair at your table today, don't be afraid to look at it. Don't be afraid of the pain. Fill that space with your love, with your memories. Cook the favorite meal of the one who is gone. Because love is stronger than death. And it always, do you hear me? Always remains hungry for life. Merry Christmas. And bright memories to those who are not with us.